This video covers general equilibrium of production and exchange. Now, before understanding general equilibrium of production and exchange, let us understand the concept of welfare. First, let us understand what is welfare. Welfare refers to satisfaction or happiness derived by an individual or society from the material things. Now, for suppose I have a material thing with me. After consumption, I get satisfied, and this satisfaction is known as individual welfare. When we group them, it is known as social welfare. But the problem with the social welfare is we find different people with a different religion, different caste, different creed, and also with a different gender. So it is difficult to attain maximum social welfare. Now, in order to attain maximum social welfare, old welfare economist has tried to compare different people on the basis of satisfaction. It is known as interpersonal comparability. But the problem with the interpersonal comparability is different religion people will have a different kind of a satisfaction. So the satisfaction differs. Old welfare economists have taken cardinal utility into consideration, whereas new welfare economist has taken ordinal utility into consideration. Now, by taking ordinal utility into consideration, new welfare economist wants to attain optimum conditions of production and exchange. And new welfare economist has ruled out interpersonal comparability. It means they are not comparing the satisfaction of a different people. Rather, they wanted to reach the optimum conditions of a production and exchange. Now, in order to reach the optimum conditions of production and exchange, new welfare economist, who is also founder of welfare economics, whose name is Pareto. Pareto has laid down three conditions in order to reach optimum conditions of production and exchange. Condition number one is producer equilibrium, which is also known as producer optimality. Second condition is consumer equilibrium, which is also known as consumer optimality. And the third condition is equilibrium of both consumer and producer. Pareto says social welfare will be maximized when we attain the optimum conditions of consumer and producer. Now, in order to understand the optimum conditions of producer and consumer, first we need to understand the meaning of optimality. Pareto, who is the founder of welfare economics, he has taken two consumers and producers into consideration to explain the concept of optimality. For a Pareto, optimality refers to a situation wherein it is impossible to make someone better off without making someone worse off. Here A is better off and B is worse off. So when one is better off by making other worse off, it is known as optimality. Pareto also says if one is better off without harming other, this is not a optimality, rather it is improvement. Rather it is known as improvement. Now based upon these two statements, Pareto, who is founder of welfare economics, explains the general equilibrium of production and exchange. Now in order to explain the general equilibrium of production and exchange, first we need to understand producer equilibrium. Now in order to understand the producer equilibrium, what we are supposed to do is we should have a little basics of isocont and the slope of isocont. Now let me start the explanation of producer equilibrium. Producer attains the equilibrium or will attain the producer optimality when the slope of producer preference curve of a producer A is equal to the slope of producer preference curve of producer B. Now you might be wondering, what is producer preference curve and what is its slope? Now let me explain producer preference curve, which is also known as iso-quant curve. Now iso-quant curve looks something like this. Now you might be wondering why iso-quant curve is sloping downwards. Now let me explain first what is iso-quant curve. Iso-quant refers to various combinations of two factors which gives producers a level of output, and that level of output producer feels as a maximum output. Now let me explain how we will try to maximize our output by taking various factors of production into consideration. Now in order to produce, producers takes the help of capital, here I have taken washing machine, and labor into consideration. Now when we fix output, for suppose washing 500 clothes is my output. When I fix this output, I have to fix how much of capital should I take, how much of labor should I take, because I always have a limited money with me. Now when I have limited money with me or limited cash with me, it is impossible to go with large amount of capital and large amount of labor. So I have to restrict labor to some extent, which will allow me to produce only 500 units, which I feel is maximum as a producer. And I have to go with a capital like 2 or 3, which will give me a 500 washing of 500 clothes. Now in this process, what actually we do is, for suppose I have a labors over here. Now when I keep on taking more and more labors, definitely my cash will not allow me to go with the capital. So I have to lose more and more machines. But definitely I have to use both of them. Now how much I need to take is a question. Now in order to answer that question, I'll go with the various combinations. Like in first combination, I'll go with 3 labors, 2 capital. Or I'll go with 2 labors and 3 capital, or go with 1 labor with 4 capital. These are the various combination. So when we are shifting from one combination to another combination, we are increasing one factor, we are increasing one factor, and we are decreasing another factor. Now here, two factors, one is increasing, the other one is decreasing. So therefore, there is an inverse relationship between two factors. Thus the reason the slope of the isocont curve is sloping downwards. Now you might be wondering why it is in this particular shape and why it is bent in. Now let me explain why it is bent in. When you look at this stick, this particular stick is sloping downwards and it is linear. It is linear because its rate is constant, which means when we are foregoing labor to gain capital, always we are foregoing 2 labor to gain 1 capital. When we are foregoing always 2 labor, then the curve will be linear. But in this case of isocont curve, it is not linear. The reason is the rate at which we are foregoing labor to gain capital is decreasing. So this particular curve will be bent. If it is increasing, it will be bent out. It is decreasing, that's the reason it is bent in. So this is why the slope of isocont curve is convex to the origin. And the slope of isocont curve is also known as marginal rate of technical substitution, or it is also known as marginal rate of transformation. Now Pareto says the slope of producer preference curve of a producer A should be equal to the slope of producer preference curve of a producer B. Now in order to bring, it means I have a producer A and I also have producer B's preference curve. I also have a producer B's preference curve with me. I have a producer A preference curve and also a B's preference curve. Now I should bring both of them together. In order to bring both of them together, Pareto takes the help of Edgeworth box. Now when you look at Edgeworth box, you might be confused, how did we get this? Now let me make it very simple. Now how we are supposed to make Edgeworth boxes? Here we have producer's A's preference curve, which is known as isocont curve, producer B's. Now we have to join them. We have to join them in this manner. Now when we join them, producer A, which is producer A's indifference curve, which is in blue color, and producer B's indifference curve of a producer, it is an isocont curve. It's not an indifference curve, it's an isocont curve. So isocont curve of a producer A, which is in blue color, is tangent to the isocont curve of a producer B. So when you join these tangent points, here is one tangent point, here is one tangent point, here is one tangent point. When you join all these tangent points, will form a contract curve. This particular curve is known as contract curve, and this particular curve is also known as Pareto optimality. And Pareto says on this particular curve will have a optimality. Anywhere this side or the other side will not have a optimality. Optimality is only on the contract curve. Now, in order to explain the general equilibrium of producer and consumer, is also known as general equilibrium of production and exchange, we have to convert this particular curve into production possibility curve. Now let me explain how we are supposed to convert this particular curve into production possibility curve. Now by joining, we got this curve. Now we have to convert this into production possibility curve. Now production possibility curve looks something like this. C and D is a production possibility curve. Now when you look at this particular curve, this is one isocont, this is two isocont, it is a three isocont. Now isocont 3 has a more improvement than 2, 2 has more improvement than 1. It means now this point is known as marginal rate of technical substitution. So we are joining marginal rate of technical substitution to form the contract curve, and we are taking the help of contract curve to form a production possibility curve. So when we are telling it is an improvement of this, so definitely marginal rate of substitution of this particular point will be, marginal rate of technical substitution of this particular point will be more than this particular point, and this particular point will be more than this particular point. So what is happening here? Marginal rate of technical substitution is actually increasing. Thus the reason the production possibility curve is concave. Clear? Now on the production possibility curve, on if you talk about point A, or you talk about point B, or you talk about point E, or you talk about point F, all the points will talk about optimality. But which point is actually optimal with the consumer? We don't know. Now in order to know that, we have to understand the second condition of a Pareto, which is known as consumer equilibrium. Now what is consumer equilibrium? Now we already know that consumer equilibrium will be attained when the slope of indifference curve of consumer A is equal to the slope of indifference curve of a consumer B. Now here indifference curve is also known as consumer preference curve. Now it will also look like the isocont curve. Now if you look at indifference curve, it is also same, and Pareto tells when the slope of indifference curve of a consumer A is equal to the consumer B, then we'll reach equilibrium of a production. Now here is consumer A and the consumer B. Now let us bring them together. When we bring them together, we'll again form a contract curve. When we join all these points, we'll form a contract curve. Now in order to show the general equilibrium of a production and exchange, one should be in the form of contract curve, the other one should be in the form of production possibility curve. Now this production possibility curve and the consumer's contract curve should be brought together in order to understand the general equilibrium of production and exchange. Now let me show this with a diagrammatical presentation. Now first, we are supposed to take production possibility curve. Now we already know that every point on production possibility curve is a point of optimality or point of efficiency. But which point we are supposed to take into consideration, we don't know it. Now in order to know, let us understand illustration. Now here I have a consumer who tells about his marginal rate of substitution. He tells, I am ready to forego 1y in order to consume 1x. And we have a producer who talks about his marginal rate of transformation, and he tells, I am ready to forego 2y in order to produce 1x. Are they equal? No, they are not equal. Now we need to bring them equal. It means 1x by 1y should be equal to 1x by 2y. 2y is here, and here 1x by 1y. Now both should be 1x by 1y only. Now let me show with the graphical presentation. So I've already drawn production possibility curve. Now here we have 1x by 2y, this point. Now in order to equate them, we have to draw the contract curve of a consumer inside the production possibility curve. I've drawn it. Now you have to draw the contract curve. Contract curve will be going in this direction and it will stop somewhere here. So at this point, not that this point is also efficiency, but it's not a efficiency of a consumer. This point is not a efficiency of a consumer. This point on the production possibility curve, which will equal marginal rate of transformation, and also it will equal marginal rate of substitution. Now if you talk about the profits and the budget of a profit of a producer and the budget of a consumer, you can draw a budget line over here. It means the marginal rate of transformation is equal to marginal rate of substitution is equal to W by R, which is known as budget line or a price line of a producer. So when this happens, the producer gets the maximum production, and consumer gets the maximum satisfaction, and producer also gets the maximum profits. When we reach that, we'll reach a general equilibrium of production and exchange. Thank you. Reference: Modern Economic Theory, K.K. Devitt. All the best.